What if your next luxury vacation could do more than help you to relax? What if it could change someone else's life as well and even change your own? Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Wayne Veldsman, and in today's episode of Journey to Legacy, I sit down with Christopher Hill, founder of Impact Destinations and Hands Up Holidays, to talk about how one trip to South Africa completely changed the direction of his life and led him from investment banking into building purpose-driven travel experiences that create real impact. Today, we talked about how travel can shift your worldview, why meaningful experiences can shape the next generation, and how following your passion can lead to a life that feels lighter, more aligned, and more fulfilling. If you've ever wondered how to build a life of success that also means something deeper, this episode is absolutely for you. I hope you enjoy. So, Chris Hill, you're the founder of Impact Destinations and Hands Up Holidays. Thanks for being here today.
It's an honor, Wayne.
So tell us a little bit about Impact Destination, Hands Up Holidays. What are you all working on?
Well, they're two brands that I created, and they both had the underlying ethos of luxury travel that makes a difference. And however, the difference between the two is that with Impact Destinations, it's your philanthropic donation which enables the experts to do what they do best, and at the same time will unlock a unique experience for you as the traveler. So an example of that would be, say, on a safari day in South Africa, you can participate in a rhino relocation from a reserve that's facing a lot of poaching to a reserve in Botswana that's much better protected. So the idea here is that you actually get into the helicopter with the veterinarian when he's darting the rhino, and then once the rhino's been darted, land the helicopter, spend some time with that sedated rhino, and then help to see it get airlifted off to Botswana. So it really is about leaving a legacy and being able to say, I saved the life of a rhino whilst on safari. And about 80% of our experiences that we offer with Impact Destinations are wildlife conservation focused. And then we've got a couple of that are humanitarian. For example, we have in Australia, people can fund a scholarship for a promising Aboriginal arts student. And then in return for that scholarship, they get to spend time with an established Aboriginal artist from whom they can commission their own unique work of art. And yeah, so that's Impact Destinations. And then with Hands Up Holidays, you are actually rolling up your sleeves and getting involved in a project. You could think of it as in a sort of service type project. So, for example, this could be helping build a house. It could be being a reading partner at a school, or helping at a wildlife rescue center. For instance, preparing the meals for monkeys and parrots, and then maintaining their enclosures at a wildlife rescue center, creating enrichments to simulate the animals, going around with the veterinarian, and just learning a lot about the animals. So that one's more hands-on. Both, I should say, are all a combination of that project with more conventional sightseeing that you do on a typical luxury vacation, but completely tailored for your preferences.
Interesting to me. So Impact Destinations is focused in this narrow piece of the puzzle where you are donating to a philanthropic organization to help them do a project, and then you actually get to go along and experience the impact that you're helping to create. Impact Destinations, where Hands Up Holidays is actually you're doing more volunteer work, is what it sounds like, as well as I'm sure a very unique experience at a holiday.
Each trip is unique because they're tailored exactly to the particular client's preferences. Yeah.
This is interesting. I've never heard about these unique type of experiences. Like, where did you first come up with this idea to actually combine tourism, luxury travel with truly making an impact?
Yeah, good question. Well, it happened. My backstory is that I'm from New Zealand and I studied at college here in New Zealand, did a law degree and a business degree. And then I ended up working for an investment bank in London. And and so I spent 6 years in finance in the city in London. And then in that sixth year, I took a trip to South Africa. And on that trip, in addition to going on safari and exploring the wonders of Cape Town and the garden route and the winelands, I also helped to build a house for a family in one of the townships. This, it really just enriched the whole travel experience so much for me. It added sort of two extra dimensions to travel that I previously hadn't encountered. And those dimensions were, firstly, I got to interact with the local people. I got to hear their stories. I got to gain insights into their lives and engage with them. And it was really special. And then, secondly, it felt fantastic to actually make a difference in the lives of the family that we were helping alongside to build the home. And so I got thinking, wow, I've learned some good business skills. Why don't I put into something that I find a bit more meaningful and fulfilling and make it easy for others to have similar experiences to what I just had, which, you know, I mean, it sounds a bit cliche, but it changed my life. So yeah, I was pretty excited to make it happen for others.
Wow. Chris, so I'm sitting in Cape Town right now. I'm not sure if you were aware. And so, yeah, the story of this impact that South Africa left on you hits really close to home for me. I am sound completely American, but I'm originally South African, and so it's an amazing place that leaves an amazing impression on a lot of people, and clearly including yourself, that it was actually a life-changing experience. I mean, I'm assuming you didn't expect this going into the trip, or what was planned originally?
Yeah, you're quite right, Wayne. A bit of the more of the backstory that I didn't mention is that when I first moved to London, so this was in 1996, I had a couple of roommates, and one of them ended up moving down to South Africa, and eventually he ended up becoming a tour guide in Cape Town, and he invited me on a trip with him and his wife to explore the country. He was sort of just starting out in tour guiding, so it was in his sort of off season when he didn't really have clients. So, and I didn't really do much convincing to go down with him. And he and I were essentially was thinking, I've worked in finance for 6 years, what next? And so we were, just brainstorming some ideas around what to do next. And at that point as well, I was considering there was a startup that I was involved with, and I was considering taking more uh, full-time role with that. And he knew that I love to travel. And so we were sort of spitballing ideas in the travel industry. And and one of them, uh, I suggested, why don't we what do you think about combining sightseeing with volunteering? And he said, yeah, I like that idea. Um, I've got a good friend of mine is he runs Habitat for Humanity in Cape Town. Do you want me to see if he, if there's a build happening for when we get down to Cape Town? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And as Providence would have it, there was a build happening, and so that segues into that part of the story where I was actually able to participate in it.
It's amazing how connections that cross our lives, right, can steer us in totally different directions if we're open to it. And by simply asking the questions of, well, what more impact could we make, right? Who can you connect me with? And we just need to be curious and open to it, huh?
Connections have been the story of my life. Yeah, absolutely.
Chris, you mentioned that you almost were getting involved with another startup. Have you always considered yourself entrepreneurial? How did that spark happen in your life?
I wouldn't say that I always consider myself entrepreneurial. My father we did start up. There's a couple of businesses as well. So there was an influence in my family. But when I was at college, I was all set to become a lawyer. I worked over the summer at a law firm and really enjoyed it and thought, yeah, I'm going to be a lawyer. And so they offered me a job, which I accepted, although got them to agree that I could travel for about 9 months. But my thinking at that point was, I'll get travel out of my system and then will settle down and become a lawyer. And so, not really thinking entrepreneurially at all. Needless to say, though, that 9 months only fueled the flames and the passion for travel. But then, even at that point, I went into finance. So it wasn't, yeah, I wasn't thinking entrepreneurially at that point. No.
So you went to school to become a lawyer, law school, business school, even. And the contract you signed, you decided, okay, give me 9 months to travel. I'll get this out of my system. And then I'll be ready to be on the track. And was it then and there? It wasn't then and there that it already changed the trajectory of your life, right? Because then you came back and you went towards the finance route.
Yeah. And so 6 years later that I had that trip to South Africa.
Wow. What is the impact that travel has on people that like changes the way that they think? And is it, I think it's necessary for everyone in their life to travel to figure out somewhat their purposes?
I wouldn't necessarily put it that strong. And I think it's necessary. I think it definitely helps, but I think you can find your purpose without traveling. I'm sure there's people that are not in a position to be able to travel, and so but can still find their purpose.
Okay, so they're not glued together necessary,
I don't think
right?
so.
But yeah, what is it about travel? Like, what does that actually change inside of a person?
Yeah, I think if and again, I think travel it's not all necessarily all travel. I think you've got to have to still have the right mindset of having an openness. And that openness is particularly to other ways of life and other cultures and an openness to I guess having your world view shifted. And so that travel absolutely facilitates that if you're of that mindset to being open.
Okay, so if you're in the mindset of being open,
Yeah, I think
then
you can
travel will
travel.
actually facilitate it.
Yeah, you could travel to a resort and never leave the resort and not really have any real sort of mindset shift.
True. So it is very much dependent on where you go, what you do. And so it sounds like you all are focused on creating those unique experiences, right? Making sure that your clients are traveling to those unique places.
Yeah, and that's absolutely nothing against Barbados. You can still travel to Barbados and have a really meaningful experience. But if you just go to a resort and don't leave it, then it's more difficult to do that.
Different. Tell me a little bit more. Who are like the ideal people that you're typically working with?
Well, in the context of Hands Off Holidays, when we first launched it, I had young professionals in mind as our key target audience. So 25 to 35-year-olds, cash rich, time poor, who wanted to have a great vacation, but also wanted to make a difference. I guess people like myself at that point. Um, but actually, really from the outset, we were getting firstly inquiries, then bookings from families. And families weren't on my radar at all when I was setting it up. It just didn't even occur to me that they want to be traveling with us. I didn't have kids of my own at that point, and yeah, as I say, it didn't occur to me. So I'd ask them, why are you booking with us? And they say things like, our kids come from pretty privileged backgrounds, and we really want them to appreciate just how fortunate they are. Or they'd say, we were looking for a great family bonding experience, and this nails it for us. And that really resonated with me. And so, to the extent that we sort of shifted our focus really over to families, and that's not to exclude anyone else, but certainly today, our focus with Hands Up Holidays is primarily in the family audience. And I should say as well that it's predominantly American families that do travel with us. And then with impact destinations, it's not the messaging with Hands Up Holidays is largely focused on families. With impact destinations, it's more neutral. And what we've found, however, is that it is probably you describe as that sort of baby boomer age bracket is the where most of our clients are coming from. We do still get families and we get even younger people as well, but it is predominantly people I'd say sort of in their 60s plus that are traveling with us with impact destinations.
What an amazing experience it must be for families, especially for kids, that early on in their life, they get to see it. It sounds like a totally different way that the world operates if they were pretty well off, and now the parents want them to see another way of life.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, I can speak on my own experience of this, having taken our kids on trips. Like we were recently in Bali, Indonesia, and there we got to install or help install a disabled accessible bathroom for a paraplegic. And the context of that is that Bali, being a Hindu island, if you're born with a disability, it can be considered like bad karma. And so, and if it's something really serious like paraplegia, you can be sort of hidden away from the rest of the world and lead very lonely, isolated life. And so to be able to provide a measure of dignity and independence in something so personal, such as going to the bathroom, it's really quite profound. And so our kids were able to get involved with drawing water from the village well and then transferring that water over to where the cement was being mixed by hand. And they got involved with that mixing of the cement and then labeling that new cement into the wheelbarrows, then wheeling it over to the experts, where the experts who were doing all the tricky parts. And that's part of our model actually as well. And I describe it as a volunteering model where it's the funds that our clients bring and actually enable us to employ local people, employ them to do the tricky parts. And on quite a lot of our projects, particularly the bigger projects, to get most of the work done before the client arrives so that our clients can, even with a limited amount of time, say, 3 or 4 days, can still have an experience where they get to do the finishing touches and they get that satisfaction of completion and that great experience of handing it over to the beneficiary and still get the engagement. And that's where the magic happens for them in that 3 or 4 day period. So yeah, and our kids also got to play soccer with the local kids and got that interaction as well. So that's wonderful. Then another story that springs to mind of kids and the impact it's had on them was a trip that we arranged to Morocco, and the family was helping build a library at a school about 45 minutes outside of Marrakesh, and the trip went really well. Essentially, I didn't really dwell on it. It was just another great trip until a few months later, I got an email from the family saying it's Christmas time. And actually, our kids have said they don't want their gifts this year. They want to send their gifts to the children that they were playing with at the school. And yeah, so that really touched my heart. And said, yeah, that's really speaks volumes of why I am doing what I do.
Quick break here. I want to share something with you guys. And it's the fact that I've always hated shopping. Like, seriously, I'd rather do almost anything else. I'm the kind of guy who finds one shirt that fits pretty perfectly, it looks good enough, and then I wear it essentially every day. I don't want the mental load of having to figure out every day if something looks good or if it's in style. And that's exactly why I'm excited about our newest sponsor, Taylor. Taylor is a menswear rental subscription where stylists and AI pick outfits for you from hundreds of premium brands. They send you outfits that match your lifestyle and your vibe, and you wear them for a few weeks, and then you simply send them back in exchange for a new batch. It's free shipping both ways, no need to do laundry, and no more shopping. Plus, if you really love something they send you, you can even buy it for up to 70% off. It's honestly a really smart system. So, if you're like me, you want to look sharp without wasting time, without filling your closet with stuff you barely wear, and without wasting mental energy, this is the greatest option. Head on over to taylor.style to try it for yourself and use code JTL for 25% off your first month. That's Taylor, TAELOR.style. And use code JTL for 25% off your first month. It does. Two such great stories. How interesting from the cultural experience in Indonesia, right, with somebody with a disability or paraplegic, to being able to help them have that dignity in their life through helping to actually build this disabled bathroom. And then the story in Marrakesh, where, as you said, like it was of course a great experience, but you didn't think too much after it until you realized a few months down the line, wow, this impact was huge. That the kids don't even want their own Christmas presents. They want to send it now to these friends that they made that they see are not as well off as they are.
That's really
Wow.
special.
Unbelievable. That's super special. Now, I think it makes a huge difference, especially for younger people, to see other ways of life. And if you travel to certain areas to have these types of experiences, it can really change your entire future trajectory. I mean, Chris, you went from investment bank like into this direction, which is such a huge flip. Like if you could think back, like what was that experience like? I can only imagine it was unusual, somewhat scary, like transitioning from a very secure finance career into the unknown.
I think a couple of things. One, for me, it was a calculated risk in that I didn't have a family at that point. I didn't have a mortgage. And so for me, the downside was pretty limited. You know, if it all didn't work out, I could just go back to finance or more, who knows? So it was that sort of mindset combined with a sense of calling that this is actually where I'm meant to be helped make it a lot less scary.
So you saw it as a calculated risk where you
Uh,
didn't have a very big downside, or you see, you didn't have a family to support, you didn't have a mortgage, and you're understanding that you could always go back, right, to finance or even to law. And so it allowed you to somewhat proceed with confidence. How do you think that we can speak to some of the new entrepreneurs that are listening, or better yet, let's say wannabe entrepreneurs that are afraid to take the jump? What can we tell them to motivate them to have this understanding of, well, you can always go back to what you were previously doing, or just calculate the risk.
yeah, well, I think that's absolutely true. And then I would overlay that by saying it doesn't even necessarily need to be binary. You could do the two in parallel. And so, have your day job and then moonlight in your entrepreneurial ambition. And so then it comes down to finding that time and making that your priority. Obvious thing to look at would be, how much are you wasting time on screens? And you might not be, but if you are, and obviously a lot of people are these days, that's the low hanging fruit to cut that out and focus that time on your entrepreneurial ambitions.
What a great piece of advice, honestly, that like you don't have to be so binary in it. You don't have to pick one or the other. As you say, like start to moonlight one direction. Is that the route that you went at first?
It's not actually. I think just because I'm very privileged, very fortunate that 6 years in finance set me up quite well financially, so I could also take the time out to uh, just focus on this. But I fully acknowledge that it was a quite a privileged position, and not everyone has that luxury.
Yeah. No, of course. No, I think that's wonderful. I, from my side, my story was that I was unfortunately let go just blindly from a position, and I jumped full force into entrepreneurship, just like studying online, trying to learn everything I could while trying to make money to survive. And so I love sharing exactly what you just did of like have a main job to be able to pay your bills. So you don't stress as much and build on the side until you reach a point where you can step away. Or of course, if you have had a corporate career for a while, like look at your savings, save up, like and then be able to take a calculated risk to move forward with. Chris, so you guys are making a pretty big impact, right? I'm curious, like, what does the future look like, or what's the bigger purpose that you're trying to help create in this world through impact destinations and hands up holidays?
Well, you said it right at the outset that you'd never heard of this sort of concept. And
Mm.
unfortunately, that is pretty typical. And so the big vision would be that everyone is aware that this is an option. And especially, I mean, yeah, it'd be lovely for everyone to know about it, but especially those that have the means to be able to travel this way. If and so that's in that sort of high net worth, affluent traveler audience. If there was, if this style of purpose driven travel was sort of as part of the menu, so to speak, of travel options. So there might be Antarctica, and it might be a cruise, it might be safari is in their list, and then the fourth, as part of this, the menus that they're evaluating, so they're aware of it as an option, is an impactful, purpose-driven trip.
Just making it simply aware that this is an option for a way
Yes,
to
exactly.
travel and something to do.
Yeah,
Honestly, because, everybody, I can't say everybody, but a lot of people love to travel and to escape and see new cultures. And this is a piece that can just add and almost give people a little bit more meaning for through actually helping to make an impact. I absolutely love that, Chris. You mentioned before the show, you said a big lesson that you've learned is that following your passion makes life easier and more fun. Where did that come from originally? Why is that your belief?
this is my belief because I've lived it, and so in contrast with the finance route that I went initially, where yeah, I got a lot out of it, but I wasn't in my flow state, shall we say. There was a lot of peaks and troughs with working in investment banking, and the lows were really quite low, all nighters, and sometimes not getting the recognition for those all nighters and so on, and so if I contrast that with the travel businesses that I set up, where I am passionate about it. I love just jumping out of bed every morning, and the first thing is getting the feedback from the clients and from the communities that they're impacting. I mentioned just now flow state, and I feel like I am in my flow state. And just when you're in your flow state, everything is easy. Versus where working in the finance, it was not easy. It was still hard graft and very much getting their pound of flesh and learned some great things, but happy to have turned my back on it.
So interesting, right? That until you kind of experience a shift like that, it can be difficult to understand that
Yeah.
your day to day is a lot of additional effort that doesn't feel good because of course like when you're working towards your purpose like you're still putting in a ton of effort, oftentimes more hours, working harder than you did before, but it almost has this lighter feeling behind it that you're working towards something that you're, dare I say, meant to do that's actually going to make a bigger impact and leave a legacy on this world.
You know that.
Yeah. Chris, on the topic of legacy, like what does that even mean to you? What's your definition of legacy and what are you hoping to leave behind?
I would define legacy as pretty simply, leaving the world a better place than you found it, and and the nuance I'd add to that would be and preserving as much as possible for future generations. And so my own hope is that through both impact destinations and hands up holidays, we can have an impact, but have a greater impact than I personally can do. So facilitate others to preserve things like wildlife or just um, humanity and common, I was going to say decency, but respect in a multiplied way is how I'd love to leave that legacy.
Preservation piece is really interesting to me, right? Leaving the world in a better place than we found it, but preservation as well. And then through your efforts, you are multiplying the impact by helping to facilitate others to go make change happen, to go have an impact for themselves and for the rest of the world also.
Well, that's right, Wayne. And in that context of preservation, the obvious thing is wildlife. And I mean, as you're in South Africa, so you know is probably better than anyone. You know, the plight of rhinos, of elephants, of all the species, in fact, you know, seriously at risk. And it's not just Africa. You've got orangutans in Indonesia that are facing habitat loss due to palm oil production. And that's an experience where guests can fund the rescue of an orangutan family to a protected island and then go out and track the orangutans in the wild. So yeah, it's not just Africa, but you know, there's these incredible species that are at serious risk.
Animal and nature conservation is such a beautiful thing. Like thank you all for like what you're doing, honestly, because it does make a big impact. And also just the fact that we mentioned earlier, like getting the word out that this is an option for people to not just donate money, which is of course super helpful, but like go get the hands-on experience and like feel the impact firsthand because that's going to cause them and yourselves to actually share it more and that impact's going to ripple out to everybody around us.
It was a great word. I was thinking of that while you were talking, Wayne, and it nails it. Yeah, it is that.
Mm.
Yeah, the knock-on effects that happen when you actually do something firsthand that you can't really quantify when you're just speaking like this or you know thinking about it.
Chris, what trips you guys have coming up in the future? I don't know if people wanted to learn more, get more of an idea of things that they might be able to participate in. What's in the works?
In the works, well, with cancer holidays, we have Zimbabwe, so not too far from you in the works. We have Puerto Rico, and we've just launched Roatan in Honduras. And then with impact destinations, can give you a sneak peek into something that's certainly not yet live and not yet even fully confirmed, but we're in the closing stages of it. Is the opportunity to fund a raid of a brothel that's employing sex trafficked young women in Asia. I won't say the destination just yet. And the idea with this is that you can fund this raid, and then the unique experience it unlocks for you is that you actually get to speak with the people doing the raid before the raid, and then meet with them afterwards and hear how it all went. So again, making a huge impact and getting an incredible experience that you know you can dine out for years.
Wow, how crazy, dare I say, impact destinations that's in the works. Like you said, it's not confirmed, but this concept that you can help fund a absolutely life-changing event, right? An initiative of this brothel raid to save people's lives and then potentially get to experience a piece of it with those individuals that actually went and made it happen. Wow, unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it.
Wow. Chris, thank you so much for what you do and for your time. I greatly appreciate it, right? For everybody else out there that wants to learn more, where's the best place for them to go?
We have two websites, impactdestinations.com and handsupholidays.com. We're on socials as well, but the websites is probably best. And one final thing to add is that any inquiry that comes through, I personally handle. That's my passion project these days, is to craft these itineraries uniquely for you. And so you can have the confidence that I will look after you if you do get in touch.
Chris, I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Wayne. It's been a blast.
What a powerful conversation that was with Christopher Hill. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank all of you for tuning in today. I really loved hearing about Chris's experience in South Africa and how it helped to change the course of his life and inspired him to build businesses that help people travel with more purpose, more heart, and more impact. Man, what a huge pivot he made in his life. My three biggest takeaways from this episode today are these. First, is that purpose really changes everything. The work that we do may still be hard, but when we care deeply about what we're building, it just feels completely different. Second, travel can be a powerful tool for growth when you approach it with openness and a willingness to connect. And third, legacy is about leaving the world better than you found it and really creating these ripple effects that go far beyond yourself. Chris, thank you so much again for sharing with us. And to everybody listening, thank you for tuning in and for your support. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who needs this reminder that success means more when it creates real impact. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week on Journey to Legacy.